So my first trauma was when I lost my father at, I think, age 10 or 11. And
my condolences.
Oh, thanks. May he rest in peace. It was a long time ago, and the circumstances under which I lost him left me stuck for a very long time. And I realized that anytime I went through something, my mind goes back to my last memory with him.
Okay.
Anytime I go through a challenge, anytime someone does something that hurts me, I remember, and it's like I'm stuck at that place where I lost my dad.
My guest is a Kizomba instructor.
Já faz algum tempo desde que entraste na minha vida, e até hoje casamento é só teoria. Tua família já me olha como uma mentira. Supostamente não era pra ficar comigo.
She uses TikTok to create mental health awareness.
Also take note that mental health doesn't necessarily mean the absence of stress, the absence of challenges. When we speak of mental health, I bet most of you by default think of depression, bipolar, anxiety. So
she's a certified life coach and mental health advocate. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today is Miss Roxanne Bougsin Koffi.
So we're back. Okay, so Roxanne, why did you become interested in being a mental health advocate? Because for me, if it wasn't my lived experience getting diagnosed with a mental health condition, I'm telling you, I'll be living my life somewhere else. I'll not be a mental health advocate. I wouldn't be in a mental health community. I'll not even be interested in anything they are doing.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you ended up being interested in a field that is highly stigmatized, highly discriminated. Like, it shouldn't be something you will be interested in doing.
Okay. Wow. Thanks for that question. So my interest in mental health, I think, sparked from, would it be after uni? I think I've always been interested in psychology. Unfortunately, I didn't do a degree in psychology, but after school, I came to study a bit of it. But I was always interested in what is happening on the other side, what is happening in people's minds, what is happening in people's, why are people behaving the way they do. I was always interested in human behavior. When someone does something, I'm thinking, what made them do this? Because I wouldn't do that. Or even when I do something, I'm thinking, why did I behave this way? What is informing my behavior? Generally, I've always been interested. Now, what made me take an initiative to say, you know what, I'm going to go into this field and really get myself into it was my lived experience also, not necessarily with a mental health condition, but with trauma.
Okay, and that is what we are going to be talking about.
Yes, trauma. Because I came to realize that trauma is an aspect of mental health that we barely talk about. When we talk of mental health challenges, we are more focused on the diagnosed conditions.
Yes.
Okay, and that is what also brings about the stigma. If only people will realize that mental health is on a big spectrum where so many levels come in, then we can be open about the conversation. But so I realized that I was going through certain things. So my first trauma was when I lost my father at, I think, age 10 or 11. And
my condolences.
Oh, thanks. May he rest in peace. It was a long time ago, and the circumstances under which I lost him left me stuck for a very long time. And I realized that anytime I went through something, my mind goes back to my last memory with him. Anytime I go through a challenge, anytime someone does something that hurts me, I remember, and it's like I'm stuck at that place where I lost my dad. So I became very stuck at that place where I lost my dad. So some of the circumstances under which he died that left me traumatized was I wouldn't go much into details.
Sure.
But long story short, I wasn't able to attend his funeral. I was not there when he died. And till date, I don't know where he's buried. I don't know. I never paid homage, but he was someone that I was super, super close to, right? He and my mom were not together. And so he was the one I lived with. So one day, my mom goes like, okay, we are going here, or we are going here. And then I go with her. We never return. And then that was the last I saw my dad. And, and maybe days or months later, I hear he's dead. And he's dead. I never got to go to the funeral. I never got to see the end of it. So I never had closure.
Yeah.
So that lack of closure and that deep feeling of abandonment from my dad left me traumatized for a long time. And it took me, like, I had to come into my teens and 20s to even realize that this is where this is coming from.
Okay.
It affected my behavior. It affected my relationships a lot. And I had to, like I said, generally, I like to confront why people behave the way they behaved. And I developed some patterns. I developed some behaviors or reactions to things. And I have to go back and confront, where is this coming from? Why do I behave the way I do? And when I started going into psychology, it made more sense to me that, okay, this left me traumatized, and this is why I have developed these patterns or habits to cope. Yeah.
Okay. So you have basically given us your experience with childhood trauma.
Yes.
And did anybody, as you were growing up, anybody come and tell you, Roxanne, I think that all these things you are going through, I think you are traumatized? Nobody really told you anything?
Not at all. In fact, till date, the topic on trauma, like I said, is not a common topic because it's not an easy place to be. It's easy to say, permit me to use a condition. It's easy to say, okay, this person has bipolar. Okay. It's easy to say this person suffers from depression. But it's not easy to say I'm going through trauma because of neglect. It's not easy to explain to someone that I'm going through trauma because I've been abandoned or grief or I've lost someone. They go like, we don't even have the expressions to articulate it. Like, we don't even know, how do we express it? Okay, you lost your father. Everybody loses their father. Get over it. At the end, life goes on. But then, the in-betweens, like me feeling a lack of sense of self, a lack of identity, low self-esteem, lack of confidence. I feel my back is against the wall. This person was my parent, and this person was part of me, and I've lost this person. I've lost a part of me. We don't really have the language to navigate those conditions. Yeah. So nobody looked at me and say, Rox, you are traumatized and therefore you need help. I have to come to that conclusion.
So supposing you didn't do your analysis, you will still be living your life not knowing that you have been traumatized.
Exactly. In fact, and to go further, to even go deeper, at first I thought it was just me losing my dad that traumatized me. But then my experience with my mom also triggered more, also added that, because she was a single mom. It's not easy, raising a child on your own. So I went through a bit of neglect and how do I put it, a lot of emotional
turmoil.
Yes, like roller coaster with her, because we didn't understand each other. She didn't understand me, I didn't understand her. We've both lost somebody. I'm a child. She's also trying to now accommodate me. I'm living with her for the first time. It's like a whole lot of clash, and it was a mess. So I had to confront it, because I was always in pain. I was always in emotional pain. I was always in turmoil. I was always questioning, why me? Why? And then some of the habits that I developed was sabotaging myself. I realized that in my relationships, in my workplaces, or in my relations with other people, I played small. I didn't really think highly of myself. I had low self-esteem. I was not confident. I didn't believe. I thought I've lost everything. Like, what is there to live for?
Okay.
I put myself down. And all these things are, you may think that they are normal personality traits or normal habits that everybody have, but sometimes it is people coping with trauma. Sometimes really people are just coping with trauma. Now, if we get into what trauma is in simple terms, I will define trauma as an event or an experience that puts you through emotional distress or emotional pain. And childhood trauma is very prevalent because as children we are most vulnerable to trauma. Our brains are still developing. Our brains have not mastered mechanisms to cope. So every little thing that happens to us, we are prone to feel traumatized or go through trauma. And that's why in the beginning you were like, everybody has gone through trauma or something. I'm like, who hasn't? Like, who hasn't?
Yeah, I did say that. Childhood trauma. It's like what traumatized you may not traumatize me.
Thank you.
So, we should all be like mindful and watch kids. Me, I always say that if I had to go back to the classroom and be a teacher, I think I'll be a more
tolerant teacher.
Tolerant and more like kind, inclusive, more empathizing, because at that time me now was already frustrated.
That's true.
You know, and now when I look back, like now that I'm older, I say, what if my actions may have traumatized a student? You know, and I'm living my life not knowing that I have caused someone emotional pain, emotional distress, like you were saying. And even people, when you think about trauma, people think, oh, you know, in hospitals we have trauma surgeons, trauma units. Like, it means when we say trauma, it's all about physical pain, blood, and all that. People don't know that we have something called childhood trauma, emotional trauma. We have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. People don't know all these things. So, like, as I sit here, I feel like people are walking. If you check their emotional states, people are walking with
all of us,
blood oozing,
all of us. I mean, it's like our brain is always trying to support us to survive. So there's so much pressure and there's so much expectation of the brain to ensure that we survive. And so if life is throwing stresses at you, which is inevitable, imagine the work your brain will be put to do. Like, your brain is always working. So it's like we can't escape trauma. You can't really necessarily escape trauma. It's like we just have to cope with it every day in, day out. Your mental health is determined by your ability to cope, because you can't say, well, I'm avoiding it, no trauma, no drama. It's there. You can't just say you are running away from it. It is your ability to cope. And like you said, children are really prone and vulnerable to trauma, especially trauma from parents, because they are our first caregivers or caretakers. They are the first people we knew in the world. They are the first people who will guide us to survive this world. And if they are also stressed, if they are also traumatized and they are not able to navigate through their own stresses, of course, they will project it on you, which will also injure you. Trauma is basically an injury, but an emotional one. And because we do not see it with our eyes, we don't believe it, or we don't, think of its existence. But it's very, very, it goes deep. It goes even deeper than the physical.